There's a couple handouts on the chair back there. Might want. When I was a newly minted college professor, two of the courses I was assigned were Introduction to Music Education and Music in Secondary Schools. Now, I knew nothing about how to teach those courses, what should be in them, what sort of content, what sort of activities or whatever, and so I'm going, what am I going to do? Fortunately, I did know how to use the library, and I did know how to search on the internet in its infancy back then. And I came across two books, Introduction to Music Education and Teaching Music in Secondary Schools by our guest. And it saved me. It helped me to get through and have a successful first year of college teaching, helped my students to have great resources, and for me to put together a coherent class. So thank you for that, Charles, and I'm sure there's many other people throughout a profession who could share similar things about their experiences with some of the work that Charles has done throughout his career. Little did I know, from that first year in college teaching, 16 years later, I would have the opportunity to work with Charles Hoffer as a visiting professor here at the University of Florida, and now back a couple years later as a colleague on the music education faculty. It's been a real treat for me. Charles has had an extraordinary career, as we all know, has impacted many, many lives, and of course the profession at large. And this afternoon we're going to take a little look at some of those highlights. Unfortunately, we can't get quite as in-depth as we might all like to get in the time we have together this afternoon. But we're going to look at some of the real highlights and celebrate Charles and his career together. So I'm going to sit down here and kind of do an inside the actors studio thing with Charles, and just ask him a little bit about some of the things that he's done in his career and have him talk to us a little bit about it. So Charles was born in East Lansing, Michigan, and as he likes to say, long ago, or as I've heard you say, at an early age. His father was a professor of sociology at Michigan State for more than 50 years. His mother graduated in nursing from the University of Minnesota, but she didn't work after Charles and his sister worked there. She was a stay-home mom. Do you have any recollections of those early years of your life prior to college, and of influential people or experiences maybe that influenced you to decide to pursue music as a career?
Well, I didn't decide until about senior in college, you know how a lot of us are. So I didn't know whether to major in sociology or music. And the clarinet teacher, I always thought, well, I could wind up playing clarinet in Chicago Symphony. That'd be a nice job. I didn't realize, well, that takes a lot to do that. So finally, about the last year, I started really appreciating the fact of teaching and the interaction with students and that sort of thing. And that really, I think, is when I kind of made a decision. Although I never reached a point where I said, now I've done it. I don't know. It just, job opened up and I took it and did it. So, long story short.
So the career in the Chicago Symphony didn't work out.
No, that didn't work out.
You managed to get by, though, it seems like. So you attended Michigan State as an undergraduate and were a clarinet major, and I believe
music ed too.
Well, I believe from what you talked about a couple of weeks ago when I had you in the music and higher ed class, that at first you didn't really think you were going to do music ed, but then you eventually did, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, then when I went to Eastman, I thought, well, I want to go to the roughest and hardest school that gave it an accredited degree. So that's why I went finally to Eastman and did a clarinet and music lit major there. And decided, well, musicology wasn't quite my thing either. So I went back and did music ed and sort of the general music kind of thing.
So when you went back to MSU, you also were teaching full-time in the Grand Ledge, Michigan schools. Can you tell us a little bit about how that was?
Only one person here knows where Grand Ledge is.
They have a good name for it. He started it.
You were the band director though, right?
No, I did the junior high band and the senior high chorus.
Okay.
And it seemed like the jobs opened up almost more in choral music, even though I was considered myself an instrumentalist and a clarinet player. It just seemed like, I think there were always more job openings in the choral general area. So who could resist?
You mentioned to me at one point in time that there weren't a lot of graduate assistantships. We have a lot of people in the room who are or were graduate assistants while they're pursuing their PhDs, but that wasn't available back in.
Somebody find John a chair.
I've got a chair right here.
All right.
The table.
That wasn't available back when you were pursuing your PhDs. So you taught schools.
Assistantships were really quite rare. I know a lot of you don't believe that, but 50 years ago things were different. A little bit about that, but they really, the first school that started giving a lot of assistantships was Indiana University under Dean Kane. But really, when I was at Eastman and other places, maybe one student had a whole graduate program. And today, as we all know, if you don't give assistantships, you have no graduate program. I mean, it's just not going to go. So, of course, in the meantime, we've raised tuition. So we took it out of one pocket and put it in another and that sort of stuff.
So after MSU, you had the PhD and you were offered a position teaching in the campus school at the College for Teachers in Buffalo, New York, where you stayed for 3 years before moving on to the school district of Clayton in St. Louis County, Missouri as a teacher and music administrator. What were those days like as a teacher in schools, music teacher in schools?
Clayton was kind of a special district that we had virtually, people didn't worry about funding. We were in a district with high-rise buildings and fancy apartments, and really the superintendent, the question he would ask you if you went in and wanted something, he said, can you justify it educationally? If you couldn't justify it educationally, you weren't going to get it, but if you could justify it educationally, you did. And he was a wonderful, positive man to work for, so I really enjoyed that. He was there 6 of the 7 years, and then my last year he went on to be head of pre-collegiate education at the University of Chicago. And the next man who was superintendent was fine too, but he was not quite the old schoolmaster type that the previous superintendent had been. But it was a small district that had 8 teachers, music teachers to work with, and so you knew everybody quite personally. It wasn't a case of, say, Orange County where you had 200, 300 music teachers. So it was really enjoyable. I did the choir again. To show you my instrumental background, I set the choir. I could set my own schedule. We met first thing in the morning. So we did a little warm-up, but anyway. And the second period I would do one semester music theory and the other semester music literature kind of course, and then the rest of the time I would try to administrate and earn my money.
So I believe it was during this time that your book publishing career started developing. And by the way, we have a collection back here. Sandy Goldie went up to the library and brought down a bunch of, is it complete? Is it a complete collection?
It's not the full work,
Okay.
so that was
I don't
everything
think so.
Paul.
Yeah. So quite a number of Dr. Hoffer's works back there, so you can browse them later on. But I think it was about this time when you were at Buffalo and then Clayton when you began to think about writing books. And could you just talk a little bit about what made you decide to start writing a book and kind of the path you followed to get it published?
There were really very few books on secondary school methods. And they were also really not very helpful. And I guess what kind of got me started, I've been thinking about it for a long time anyway. My sister had graduated from Michigan State. She was a very good student. Got married, was living in Los Angeles, teaching in a middle school and junior high school there. And she wrote a letter and said, oh, those were days we wrote letters. Anyway, she said, I know I should do this because I got an A in methods class, but exactly how do you teach a song to a choral group? You mean there's no book that really does that, tells you kind of step by step what to do? No, there weren't. So I thought, well, that's what I'm gonna do. So that's where I got the idea of that, made a proposal to the publisher, and got lots of rejections. Finally, one publisher showed a little interest and met him at a conference, and he said, if you will do a little survey, 25 or 30 top schools, see what they want in a secondary music methods course. This was at a convention, and so I went ahead and did that, didn't hear anything. About 3 months later, I got a phone call. Oh, our vice president's in town. He'd like to take you to dinner. And can you talk about a contract? Yes. And they'd like it, of course, by next week. You know, typical thing. But that really is how it got started. And because I felt the present books weren't covering adequately or in the way that they should. And I think my sister's experience was very valid. And so I don't know whether my letter in reply to her need was very helpful, but at least it got me thinking about exactly what he'd say. The method I advocated was, by the way, what we call pounding parts, very novel. It's humor, sorry. You know what I mean by pounding parts? Any choral person knows exactly what I mean. Yeah. This is it, sing it back. Anyway.
So you never know where your sources of inspiration will come from, a letter from your sister or anywhere. And also, I think another important thing to take away from that for all of our folks that are gathered here is that people look at someone like you and they see such tremendous success, but it came about really because of hard work, and it wasn't instant, and you had rejection just like all of us have been rejected for publications, but you were persistent, you stayed with it. And I believe, if I remember, initially this initial book was about choral methods exclusively. No.
That was the original proposal. I did want to do that because it weren't, her questions for choral. And
right.
I thought, well, to do choral, but that market is even smaller.
Right.
And in other words, a specialized choral methods. And besides, I wasn't a choral.
So you put out a proposal for a choral methods book, but the eventual book became secondary.
Both
yeah.
Instrumental and choral.
And that book's now in its 5th edition and widely used 50 years later, over 50 years later. So you told an interesting story about your first royalty statement the other night in your visit class. Can you share that with everyone?
Well, we got 2 royalty statements, 2 royalty checks per year. Nowadays, you get it only once. Get it in March, right at the end of about the first day of April Fool's Day. We get one in September, right at the end of September. My first royalty check came in, I owed him $250. Because I tended to make a lot of changes once we were into the proof stage. And if you do about more than 5 or 10%, then you get charged for it. And then I kind of learned how to avoid that in the future. Because I hate spending money foolishly.